Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Game Hub. I'm your host, Gamer K, and this week it is my 30th birthday. Holy crap, I can't even believe that now. I mean, I can believe it, but it's taking a while to fully come to me a bit. But in honor of that, I decided for this week's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently with my top 13s and do something that I don't really talk about that much. I mean, yeah, I've done videos when I've talked about villains in TV or villains in movies. But I've never... Actually, no, wait, that's not true. Years ago, I did my top 13 Once Upon a Time characters. And that was a good video when I was just starting out with the whole how I wanted to do my YouTube, how I wanted to... like, feeling it out a little bit. And I've been doing this for over 5 years, almost... 6 years now, almost. So, in honor of that, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite shows, a series that's been kind of important. And considering, the day I'm recording this, it is Remembrance Day. And I did not plan this one at all. So, in honor of all that, those who have fallen, those who are serving, I'm going to go through a series that is dear to my heart and dear to my family, MASH, the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital Team. Such a great show. And it's a show that can never be reproduced again because it was a product of the time, and it still holds true even to now about I mean, yeah, there are a lot of humorous stuff about that they do during the war. But it shows like the reality of a lot of the stuff too. And to commemorate that, months ago, just for fun, I jotted down my favorite episodes of every single season of MASH. And like I always do, I had to do 13. So, in honor of my birthday coming up this month, at the end of this week, and to commemorate Remembrance Day, I am going through my top 13 MASH Season 1 episodes. And why top 13? Because here at the Game Hub, only the odd can be number 1. And these are basically just my choices of my overall enjoyment of the episodes, what the episodes bring to the fans, and how it... I mean, MASH isn't really a show where it's kind of a story... what's the word? Canonly a bit. Like, it doesn't have a lot of canon stuff. Like, in the first couple seasons, they kind of jot around with things, and then later on, they kind of make things a little bit more structured. But these episodes are my favorite of the very first season of the show. A season that almost ended the show because of a couple things, but it got back up and went on for 10 more seasons, and a 2-hour finale at the end. So, everybody who's a fan, grab your martinis, grab your enema bags, and if you have a ferret face in your life, make sure you lock them in a crate. Let's get started. Starting off this list is, ironically, the very first episode, Pilot. A lot of things about Season 1 is it's more slapstick comedy than a lot of the other seasons, which I love. It brings forth a lot of the humor within the show and a lot of the serious moments during, like, the OR scenes, the surgical scenes, and all of that stuff. So it really does balance it out throughout the show, and I love that. It doesn't take itself too serious, and it doesn't go over the top goofy. Okay, that last part's a lie. Pilot. A simple episode that kind of showcases the characters and gives for those of you who never saw the original MASH movie, this is a good start where it showcases the characters, everyone's personalities, who hates each other, who doesn't, who hates Frank Burns, mostly everyone. But it's a good episode. Basically, Hawkeye and Trapper are trying to send one of the Korean kids who's helping them throughout in the camp to send them to school, I believe. Yeah, to send them to school in the States. But in order to raise that money, they offer a good prize, that being a date with one of the nurses in Tokyo. And obviously, Burns and Houlihan always have to get in the mix and cause problems and everything. So yeah, not that much in this episode has a lot of oomph. It's basically a start episode that showcases some of the zaniness of the 4077th. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to this episode. So let's get on to the better ones. Next up on the list is an episode right before the end of the season. Is it? Or I think this is I think this is the season 1 finale. Yes, it is. It's been a while, guys. Showtime. No, seriously, that's the episode name. Showtime. Basically, a bunch of the USO people, 3 singers, and a comedian come down to entertain the troops at the 4077th. The 3 ladies sing some songs, and then the comedian gets up there and makes a couple jokes. And this is what MASH does well, when they kind of blend the moments of seriousness with the moments of humor. Throughout the episode, as the comedian's making jokes about how we're all in this together, and it kind of making jokes about some stuff in the war, it cuts to some scenes where the doctors are helping the wounded in some way, whether in OR or in triage or the recovery room. I keep forgetting. The words aren't coming to me, but it does a good mix of showcasing what the comedian is saying with his jokes, and then cutting to the doctors going through some serious moments, like a joke when he said that he envies the doctors. They basically get to do nothing all day, and it cuts to a scene where Trapper is working on a patient, trying to save his life. It's an episode that, again, it's a balancing act, and that's what MASH does right. A lot of the later seasons, though, kind of get a little too serious at the time, with not so much comedy in between, but the earlier seasons are where it strides. And this episode definitely, like I said, the entirety of MASH is a balancing act. You have to have that good balance, and this episode shows it. Having the jokes, the light moments with the singing, and again, the flashback bits that showcase what the doctors go through a lot. And it just shows the viewers, they may not be going outrageous crazy like the show does, but it makes you think about all the doctors at the MASHs that actually had to go through this day in, day out. So it's a great episode and a great season finale. Next up on the list is a great one for me, a very earlier episode, Chief Surgeon Who? After Frank Burns, obviously being an a-hole in his own freaking way, believes that there should be some authority in OR. So Henry decides to appoint a chief surgeon, a.k.a. Hawkeye. And distraught by this, because again, Hawkeye is the regular doctor. Well, he's not Army. A regular doctor who believes that the whole fighting is wrong and never stops to put his mouth on the line when it comes to making jabs at the Army. So while Hawkeye is being crowned chief surgeon with a volleyball and a plunger on a throne, it just makes me laugh. Houlihan calls in a colonel to see that Frank Burns is more applicable. For those of you who don't know, Frank Burns and Houlihan and Hot Lips Houlihan been having an affair a lot, and they try to keep it sneaky, but let's be honest, they're as subtle as a train wreck on a boat in the middle of Paraguay. Yeah. And also Frank is married, so that makes it even more hilarious. And this episode is the first appearance of Jamie Farr's Corporal Maxwell Klinger, the Dodger who tries to constantly get a Section 8 by wearing dresses or any other scheme he comes up with along the way. So as the colonel arrives and wants to meet his new chief surgeon, there is a patient in post-op who needs surgery while Hawkeye's playing poker. Obviously, the surgeon doesn't like. Obviously, the colonel doesn't like that. How Hawkeye is kind of aloof. So he demands the surgery be taken place, and he runs into a whole bunch of other zaniness that happens with the people in the camp, which is hilarious. And then we get to the actual surgery scene, where Hawkeye shows his chops. And, you know, the colonel ignores what Houlihan and Burns were trying to say because, like I said, or like I'm going to say right now, one of the reasons I love Hawkeye is, yes, he doesn't give a hoot about military procedure. He's not Army. He doesn't give a damn. But when it comes, and yeah, in the madhouse like that, you have to act a little crazy or else you're going to go crazy. But when it comes right down to it, for surgery, for saving lives, Hawkeye is bar none. And that's why it's a great episode. It showcases, yeah, Pierce is aloof and everything, but he is the best surgeon that they've got. So it makes sense. It just goes to show that sometimes the people who act crazy or sometimes don't act all professional, when the time comes, they are the most professional in the situation. And that's what I love about MASH and what I love about this episode. Continuing an episode about Hawkeye's surgical skills, we have Sticky Wicket. This is an episode where a lot of the times in OR, everyone pokes jabs at each other, and Burns in particular gets jabbed at a lot for his lack of being a doctor, or that he got his diploma at the end of a Cracker Jacks box. For those of you who understand that joke, I know how old you are, or you know old references. But after thinking and always commenting about Burns, Hawkeye is at the receiving end of it, where a patient he worked on in OR isn't recuperating well, and something may have gone wrong, and Hawkeye is going crazy thinking about what he could have done wrong. Did he miss something? Did he didn't do something? Did he do something? Of why the kid's not getting better. It's an episode that really showcases that Hawkeye isn't a doctor that seeks glory and seeks the fame. He seeks to actually save lives. So when a patient is not recovering well, it bothers him a lot. And that's one of the best things about Hawkeye. He always has compassion for the patients. I mean, not like the other characters don't, but he just takes it more heart than the other characters have at the time in certain episodes. And upon overthinking everything, he believes that he did miss something, so they open him back up and finds out that it traveled along an artery or something to that effect, that a piece of shrapnel descended along. And after everyone saw this, even Burns admits that anyone could have missed that. It's kind of not dragging down about Hawkeye, not praising him in either, but basically saying that anybody could have missed that. Like if something happened, it wouldn't have been your fault. It was a very missable thing. So I do like how half the time they are bagging on each other throughout the series, but there are certain moments where they do work together. I mean, they butt heads a lot, but they're still surgeons and doctors, comrades in arms, so they gotta work together once in a while. And I do like those episodes. And this is an episode that is really, really well done. Coming in next is an episode genre that happens a lot in the series, where a certain character will be accounting events that happened previously, or not previously because it's not like a flashback episode. They just go out through different parts of the series. certain certain events that happen in the show that happen out of order. So in this case, Dear Dad, Hawkeye is writing a letter to his father about some of the antics that happened during the 4077 and close to Christmas time. I like these episodes because at least aside from Henry Blake, Hot Lips Houlihan, and Burns, every other main character, okay, except for Trapper too, because other than those four characters, everyone else in the show writes a letter to someone. And I like these episodes because it has a bunch of subjects and a bunch of events happening, but not in like a set time frame. So there's peppered here and there, and I do love that. So basically, Hawkeye basically talks about the entirety of the group of the 4077, what's going on, stuff that's happening, like Radar mailing a Jeep home piece by piece. It's a small thing, but as you watch in the background during the episode, you will see Radar taking parts of a Jeep away, and it's the small bits that you notice. And then Burns getting into an issue with Klinger, and Klinger tries to stick a grenade down his shorts, and Father Francis Mulcahy basically appeals to him, tells him that everyone's tired. I like the banter and I like the camaraderie between all these characters. There are moments when they are friends, but there are moments where they actually have to be serious at times. And I do love that. And the episode ends with Hawkeye going in a chopper to do field surgery on someone who's wounded as he's propelling down the chopper dressed as Santa Claus. It makes for a great image. A really good image. And this is just a start of these types of episodes, and I do love them. All right, let's continue. This episode is one that kind of showcases the unbelievability in this episode, but it works. The Ring Banger, where a colonel comes in and brings in some wounded, and he's not really an ass, but he's a little bit dangerous. After having a couple lines with a Trapper and Hawkeye, the colonel basically says about what he does that him and his soldiers get a couple points for themselves, turns a couple boys into men. While the guys are trying to tell him to cool it after being injured, the guy wants to get back to his unit right away. And Hawkeye points out that he's a ring banger. For those of you who kind of know, he's got a big-ass ring on his finger, and he kept, hitting the arm of the chair while the guys were talking and stuff. Basically, like Hawkeye says, trying to just say he's a quarterback in this war, and we're just the water boys. And after doing some digging, this colonel's squad brings in more casualties than them taking up land, which is a big issue. So Trapper and Hawkeye decide to play a little mind games with the colonel in order to make him not fit for combat yet. So they kind of put it into his head that he's going crazy by moving his tent over a little bit, making things about all the people of Burns being a cross-dresser, which back then, not an issue per se, but, I'm not going to get into that. Saying Hot Lips is interested, and Henry, their commander, is a booze hound, and all that stuff, and it just accumulates to some really, really hilarious moments if you don't know. If you just walk in on this show, without understanding the setup, it makes it even funnier. And it's just brilliant. It's one of those episodes where Hawkeye and Trapper try to save a lot of men by messing with one very important person, and it works. It really works, and it's an episode that is one of my personal favorites. But there are a lot of episodes to go through, so let's continue. When I first started watching MASH years ago, I mean, I didn't watch it with my family when I was young because, again, I didn't know any better in it. I didn't know stuff like this. But when I got to being a teenager and everything, I watched this from the beginning because we got the DVD special, like all the seasons. This episode, like, again, I understand that this show was set in the 1950s. But some of the stuff that happened during this made me want to go through the TV and punch some of these people. The Moose. A soldier comes into the 4077 to rest for a bit, and a Korean girl is with him. And Radar informs that the guys that what a moose is. It's basically a servant that this soldier bought from her family, and she's basically a servant to him. Yeah, stuff like that really irks me. It's like, I get it's a show and everything, and it just really irks me, stuff like that happens in these shows. And Hawkeye tries everything to get this guy to let her go, from being a captain to him being a sergeant. No, wait. Oh, no, a captain is over a sergeant. I keep forgetting the military ranks. Trying to order her, but it doesn't work. To trying to get his commander to get to order him, but the commander has a moose of his own, which sucks. So Hawkeye decides, let the chips fall where they may, and kick this guy's ass in poker until he's in deep debt, where the price is letting the girl go. And they succeed. Sadly, the girl believes that Hawkeye is now her employer, so she follows Hawkeye around and helps him around, even though he doesn't want it. So he sets her free. Okay, that's a bad term, but yeah, he sets her free. They try to get her to be self-confident, and then she comes back with her younger brother, who's basically the man of the house, who sold her in the first place, and this kid's a jackass. But then at the end of the episode, the girl comes back and says she told her brother, like Hawkeye and Trapper told her, to shove it. So yeah, she got some self-confidence. I would have loved to see this character a little bit more in the season. Not the whole series, but just a little bit more in the show, because they did so much to help her. Like, maybe she got a job at the bar that's right down the road, Rosie's, as a waitress, and the guys go in there every so often and check up on her and everything. And it could have been a throwback in a later season. It could have worked. But you know what? Like I said, they weren't so much on building up because they didn't know how far the show was going to go. And also, it takes place from 1950 to 53, and yet that's another thing with MASH. The dates and everything don't really match up and everything. If people have been there for 2 years, and then to cram three years of a war, or almost 4 years of a war within 11 seasons is hard. But I get it. I'm not going to complain. The title of this episode is a flat-out lie for me. I hate a mystery, and I love a mystery, so this episode was really, really fun. A couple of valuable items from a couple of the camp people are missing. Houlihan's hairbrush, Frank Burns' silver frame that had his mother's picture in it. A couple other expensive items have been disappearing. So they go on a witch hunt to discover who stole the stuff, which leads to some hilarious moments. And then all the stuff is found in Hawkeye's trunk. So they want to press, Houlihan's and Burns want to press charges on him, but there's really no evidence that Hawkeye's the one who did. Also, he wouldn't. So as a setup, while him and Henry are talking, he presses the intercom system to allow it to have all the stuff once the stuff is found, for it to all be in Henry's desk drawer so he can find them. So they can lift some fingerprints off of it and have people come down from Seoul. But then in the middle of the night, all the stuff is missing. And here's when you have to be really paying attention if you want to figure it out beforehand, because I'm going to let... So yeah, my spoilers a little bit for this episode, but it's an old show, so... So afterwards, Hawkeye gets on the intercom and calls a whole bunch of people into the mess tent. Now, you need to be making sure you listen to who he calls and everything. Because as Hawkeye is dressed as a poor man Sherlock Holmes, which I love, talks to all the people who are there of their possible motives for the theft. And then he announces that he treated the items with a certain chemical that will turn the culprit's fingertips blue. To which point, Ho-Jon, a Korean kid who stays around the camp and helps everyone with stuff, puts his hands down. So Hawkeye asks to see them, and the kid shows that they're not blue. And obviously Hawkeye says, yeah, there couldn't be, I was lying. So the kid basically says that they all have a lot of stuff. They're all rich. And he just needs some stuff to sell to get money to bring his family out from another village. And at the end of the episode, everyone kind of understands, and it's no big issue. Except for the fact that the kid also stole Hawkeye's poker winnings. So if you guys paid attention during that section of the episode, when Hawkeye's calling people to the mess tent, he not once calls Ho-Jon over. He calls Trapper McIntyre, Radar O'Reilly, Hot Lips Houlihan, one of the nurses, but he never says Ho-Jon. So the fact that Ho-Jon went on his own to make sure that they didn't figure it out is a clear indication. I love that this episode. This is an episode that's kind of a mystery, kind of not, but at the same time, it's still great. And definitely an episode that showcases more of the slapstick when it comes to the first season. Cowboy. After a chopper pilot bringing in wounded gets hit in the arm himself and passes out after he lands. And they call him Cowboy because he basically looks like a Texan. Cowboy hat, boots, mustache, everything. And during this episode, a bunch of issues happen. Henry's kind of has a chip on his shoulder because of things about his wife, things from HQ, Burns being on his ass half the time, and also criticizing Trapper for trying to take a Jeep out to go to a drive-in movie with a nurse, even though there is no movie. And then the Cowboy gets a Dear John, kind of he hasn't got a Dear John letter. But he hasn't gotten any mail from his woman in a while, so he's worried and kind of believing that she's, what's the term? Stepping out on him. So he wants a pass just to go and see her. Hawkeye tries to help him, but Henry nixes that. And then a lot of things are happening to Henry. For example, Hawkeye takes him golfing in the hills. A sniper shot happens that comes from inside the camp. A Jeep rams through Henry's tent. The outhouse explodes with Henry in it, but he's okay. Don't know how. Explosives on his desk chair. People are avoiding him. And he's going to Tokyo to get away from everything. To which the cowboy says that he's good to fly now. He can give him a quick ride. It will be faster. And Hawkeye finds the dynamite and everything in the cowboy's equipment. And he tries to push Henry out of a chopper for not letting him go home. But luckily, a letter did came, so the guys are reading it through the intercom system, and it's, "Dear John." But luckily, that's the guy's actual name, and it's from Reno. Goodbye, Henry. For those of you who don't know, Reno is a place in Nevada where a lot of people go to get quick hitched and everything, and it's not really the best place to get a letter from. So he wants to know what the letter says as he's threatening Henry to be pushed out the chopper. And this part really gets me. I remember it word for word almostly. Sometimes when you're away from someone, you find yourself tested. And I didn't want to write you until I knew if I passed. These parts always make my eyes water because the cowboy is listening intimately about what the rest of the letter is saying, and Hawkeye says, "If I say I love you more than ever, and that I am basically saying that she's lucky to have the most wonderful man in the world, would that tell you how I did?" And the cowboy just stops what he's doing and just finally breathes and thinks what he almost did because of uncertainty. God! You guys haven't seen me cry a lot in these videos, but the minute we're going more, and I may get more emotional, so shut up. So at the end of the episode, Henry basically gives the cowboy a couple days pass and a little bit of days to recuperate psychologically about what he almost did. And it's basically a good episode, and it kind of shows that don't jump to conclusions until you get the evidence. Next up, this is an absolute crazy episode because it's so crazy. After a long couple days of surgery and nothing else, Hawkeye thinks a couple days in Tokyo will do him good, but yeah, it's not happening. So he decides to play him and Trapper decide to play the whole crazy card, kind of, by saying that after so many hours in surgery and everything, he's snapped. And that brings us to the episode's name, Bananas, Crackers, and Nuts. It's at the end of the episode in a hilarious way, because those are all ways of describing someone who's absolutely psycho. Hawkeye acts like he's acting, and it just showcases Alan Alda's amazing acting chops, whether he can be hilariously with jokes or serious when he's serious. This episode showcases he can be crazy when he needs to be in the most beautiful of ways. From when he's talking to a nurse and acts kind of like a woman, saying that she's just interested in his body and everything, even though Hawkeye's a bit of a player himself, and it just throws people for a loop. And when he tells the nurse to give the patient the medicine, she goes to the patient and it's a dog. It's a dog. And when Trapper tells Hot Lips and Burns, because he's in charge at the moment, that he's worried about him, Hawkeye comes into the mess tent in full surgical garb and eating his food with a scalpel and the metal tweezers, and says that it's liver and that he got it from a North Korean. The one who croaked. And this scares Burns and Houlihan, thinking, because Hawkeye's always been such a stead-on guy, to see him lose it is hilarious. But they believe something is up. So they call a psychiatrist to down to, make sure he's not faking it and everything. And it turns around on all of them. From Hawkeye having to prove he is crazy to get this guy to sign, to kind of making sure that Burns and Houlihan get theirs in the end, which is hilarious. The entirety of this episode is just absolute insanity in the best way possible. It just showcases Hawkeye's acting chops. And, Alan Alda's acting chops in general. It's something that, and again, I'm glad they never did an episode like this again. Because, again, once you do something, you kind of run its course so you don't do it again. Oh, my God. Well, we got the top three next up, so let's get down to it. Make sure to pause the video and refill your martinis. Coming at number 3, the Army-Navy game is a great, great episode. It does something, again, each episode does something different, and you never see the same thing twice in MASH episodes, which I really enjoy. So everyone's getting ready to listen to the big Army-Navy game, football, and there's a bunch of fun moments in this episode. And then before the game starts, they're being bombed. Literally. A bunch of bombs are being dropped in the compound and everyone's taking cover. And to see everyone kind of lose it a little bit is hilarious. And then a bomb drops in the compound and there's no explosion. We have to evacuate! I think I did. The funny things in this episode aren't what's going on. It's the comments that are being made. And all while they're trying to get help, all the people who are trying to help are also listening to the game. So, yeah. So after asking what to do with the bomb, they have to find out if it's still ticking or anything. Do you have any stethoscopes? We're a medical unit. We need to be calm. This is what separates the men from the boys. I'm sure it will. I love Hawkeye's sarcasm. If I had watched this show growing up, my level of sarcasm would have been way up here, but I have it way here. Because I watched Ace Ventura. I watched MASH. I watched Friends when I was 10, so Chandler basically helped. I watched Rat Trap from Beast Wars throughout my life. And I watched House. So my collective sources for sarcasm make me unbelievably a-hole-ish. And a bunch of my friends and family can attest to that. So it's not just what's going on that makes the episode funny and great. It's the comments throughout within the characters that make it funny. From deciding who's going out to find out the bomb's still ticking, to the people who are trying to help. Again, trying to help, but focusing more on the game, which is hilarious. And then finding out where the bomb came from, the CIA, which is hilarious in a way. And then when Trapper and Hawkeye are disarming the bomb and Henry's telling them what to do, clip the wires. But first, remove the timer. And then the thing blows up and it releases a bunch of papers. Yeah. Give up. You cannot win. Douglas MacArthur. It was a propaganda bomb. So, one of the things I find funny about this episode is the creativity within this episode. Basically, the writers got together and said, and it was around Super Bowl time, and they said, what would be the most irritating thing during the Super Bowl? And a lot of the writers said, well, if something happened that was bothering us, so we couldn't watch it. And that's where the inspiration came from. Basically, this episode is the quintessential representation of you trying to watch a football game, but stuff keeps happening, so you don't actually get to watch the frickin' game. That is ingenious. That is fantastic. And I know damn well that if I did something like this to my dad during the football game, yeah, I'd be running for my life. Next. If there are episodes that make me laugh more than anything else in MASH, it is a good episode where the entire plot is one big screw you in a way. And Major Fred C. Dobbs is one of those. After having it up to here with Hawkeye and Trapper, Frank requests a transfer. Yeah. And during this episode, Radar finds some gold out in the hills, but it's just fool's gold. So, yeah. And in order to get Frank to stay, Hawkeye comes up with a plan. Because as we all know, 3 of the basic human emotions is greed, fear, and greed. And Frank is loaded with it. He became a doctor for money. He got married for money. He became a surgeon for money. If there was money in dying, he'd be in the tombstones already. So they plan to think if Frank could get rich staying at the MASH, he'd stay. So they play a long con about them finding gold and leaving out for Frank to find and basically rescind his transfer orders. And basically says to Hot Lips that there is gold, they're going to be rich, brings them out to the field where everything's painted gold, even the trees. Radar has gold equipment, and even the megaphone is gold. Attention, all personnel. Tonight's movie is a double feature, Greed, and The Major Was a Minor, starring Frank, There Goes My Transfer, Burns. And at the end, Hawkeye and Trapper come out in a gold Jeep. Oh my God. I love episodes where a character is getting at the end of a joke or a prank. And this one's no exception. And for the love of God, how does this, one of the worst ranked episodes of MASH, really? I don't get it. It's one of my personal favorites. Likely so, because it's in the top 3. But I talked about a couple episodes where it's funny, where it deals with serious shit, like the servant, the stealing, the fact that Hawkeye's an aloof but does well. Showtime, basically showing the comedian's comments in correlation to the actions that the 4077 have to do. But this episode at my number 1 is one of the first episodes that showcases some of the sadness of the series, and it really hits hard. Sometimes you hear the bullet. This episode has such an easy setup, but it's the stuff that happens during it that makes it one of my favorites. Hawkeye's trying to romance a nurse or have a date night with a nurse, which is always good. Well, at the same time, Frank tries to have a night with Houlihan, but hurts his back. So he kind of brings him out and tries to cover it up. You know, because they think they're so slick. So Hawkeye's told to help him out. And Hot Lip says, will you guys stop joking? He's in pain. He'll be in divorce court if you don't remove those drag marks from your tent. And then he Burns applies for the Purple Heart for being injured going to the bathroom. Henry, you're not going to endorse this idiot's promotion, are you? That's major to you. Henry, you're not going to endorse this major idiot's are you? It's all funny. It's all good moments. And then as he gets to trying to romance the nurse again, some wounded come in, and one of them is played by Opie, for those of you who love Andy Griffith's show. Yeah, little Opie's all grown up and in the army now. And it's a good act throughout this episode of Hawkeye trying to balance doing stuff in OR. No, not OR. Pre-op. No. Post-op. Thank you. That's what it's called, where all the wounded are. Post-op. I knew I'd get it. But basically, a couple people are fighting because of a stolen salami or something like that. And then a guy comes in, and it's Hawkeye's old friend who's a writer. And he's trying to write a book called You Never Hear the Bullet. And it's basically a book about the war. And this guy's a big joker, just like Hawkeye, making jokes. I'm fighting the communists. You are a communist. I'm saving the country from me. It's a quick bit in the beginning, and it's a good quick laugh. And so the book is all about. He explains it by saying, there's always that one guy in the movie, the freckle-faced blonde who shouldn't die at the end, but always does. Well, it's about that, where he interviewed this kid who was in a foxhole with with a buddy of his, and the next thing he knows, he turns around and his buddy's dead, and he never heard the bullet. Like you always hear it in those movies, the shot, but sometimes you never hear it. And this is one of Hawkeye's old friends, so it's good to see something like that humanized. And once again, Hawkeye's going back and forth between the post-op and the tent to woo the nurse. And as they're starting to get into it again, Radar's calling him, Hawkeye, Hot Lips, if you don't get out of here, I'll shoot you. It's not Hawkeye. It's not Hot Lips. It's Radar. Radar, if you don't get out of here, I'll shoot Hot Lips. It's the small jokes that make me love every MASH episode. But then afterwards, Hawkeye finds out about Opie, who's a Marine, who's trying to get out of here. He had to have his appendix removed. And that's when he basically says that he used his brother's ID. He's only 16 years old. And his girlfriend back home broke up with him because a guy came back from boot camp. So he decided if he got a medal and he became a Marine, she would want him back. And Hawkeye basically says that a woman like that, like a woman would want to be with you, not because of what you have, but the fact that you're alive. So he doesn't rat him out because if you want to play Marine for a bit, it's not going to bother me none. So then a couple more wounded come in and Hawkeye's date is basically done. And the scenes coming up are why I love this episode so much. It really showcases the humanity and the sorrow of war. And in OR, Hawkeye's going to the next patient, and it's his friend who got injured. And as they're getting ready, he tells him, like, I heard the bullet. So Hawkeye says, so you changed the title. Sometimes you hear the bullet. It's a better title, which is why the episode is called that. And as he's getting ready to his friend goes. And Henry tells him to go to another patient. And after the OR, Henry finds Hawkeye at the door crying for his friend. And Hawkeye says it's the first time he's cried since he's been to this place. There's no laughs in this scene. There's only a little bit, mostly silence, except with them talking back and forth, saying that he's my friend and I cried for him, and I've worked on so many other boys who died. Why didn't I cry for them? And Henry basically says that what he was learned is that sometimes young men die, and the second rule is doctors can't change rule number 1. It's a sad moment in the episode because it's one of the few times in the episode, in the series, where we get an actual legitimate sad scene that isn't accompanied by something laughing or something funny happening. And this is what I'm talking about, MASH. It does a great job of balancing the humor with the serious moments. And this episode is one where the majority of the episode is the funny moments. But once it gets to the serious moment, there's no laugh track. And I do love that. So many shows nowadays use a laugh track to no end. But this is an episode where it utilized it not in a great moment. And after realizing that Hawkeye can do at least keep one kid from dying, he rats out Wendell, who's the Marine, by telling Houlihan that he's 16 and have a guard posted on him and he's going home. So the kid's mad at Hawkeye for crossing him, saying, I'll never forgive you, not for my life. Hopefully it's a long and healthy hate. So after sending the kid home, Hawkeye gives him Frank Burns' Purple Heart to kind of show off that he's going home. Getting a Purple Heart for an appendix removal. And this is what I love. Again, sometimes you hear The Bullet as an episode that starts off hilarious, starts off with really, really good funny moments, has a little seriousness here and there with Hawkeye talking to the kid, and then the scene with his friend dying and that really serious moment. It's an episode that is definitely my favorite of season 1 and in my top 13 overall episodes. Like I said, at first I did my favorite episode from every single season, and then I decided, you know what, why not go through the entire season for a top 13 ideas, and I decided to video this, and yeah, sometimes you hear The Bullet. Has a lot of great humor, serious moments. The first times in the series, very serious moments. And it just showcases that a show can be deep. A comedy show can be deep and make you feel something other than laughter. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I got to say on that. I hope you guys enjoyed the list. Like, comment, subscribe down below. And join me next week where it's a Funko review. And this one is, we're going a little bit dark as we... Okay, seriously, who's writing this shit? Now, next year I'm going to get better writers. Join me next week where I review a Funko figurine of my favorite dark type from a series where you gotta catch them all. This is Gamer K, logging out.